Hello to Hope Church in Greenock. Greetings from Perth and from the folks at Perth Elim. And thank you for the invitation to contribute a devotional. It's an honour and a privilege to be asked to do it. One of the things about lockdown that I'm finding is I've got a bit more time to think about things, which can be good and it can also be not so good. It makes it harder for me to condense my thoughts this morning into a 3-hour devotional. I'm only kidding. For those of you who were going for the off button, I'll probably be about 5 minutes. Peter has to be one of my favourite characters in the whole of the Bible. It seems he was always doing something hasty that he then regretted. He was always saying things and doing things that I'm sure he wished he hadn't said or done. He said he would never deny Jesus, even if the others did, and yet within a few hours he had done it 3 times. And I'm sure that weighed heavy on him. I imagine that he thought he was disqualified from ever doing anything that Jesus had called him to do. This morning I want to look at John chapter 21 verses 1 to 17. I won't read it. Go and read it for yourselves. It's the story of Jesus and his encounter on the shore with the disciples, and specifically the restoration of Peter. At the beginning of the chapter, Peter says, I'm going fishing. Now, what I think he's actually saying is that there's nothing left for me to do here. I'm just going back to my previous life. I've totally blown it. I've totally failed. And I think he goes off with a huge weight hanging on his shoulders. He returns to his old life. He went back to what he knew rather than what he had been called into. And how many of us do a similar thing, and then we carry a heavy yoke for however long we carry a heavy yoke. The thing that you've done where in your mind it disqualifies you, and where you think this is where I blew it. But that day on the shore, Jesus invited Peter and the other disciples to a breakfast of fish that he had cooked on a charcoal fire. And this charcoal fire is the thing that has captured me and the thing that I really want to talk about this morning. There's only 2 times in Scripture where a charcoal fire is mentioned. The word specifically is anthrakia. One is in verse 9 of John chapter 21. And the other is when Jesus is being questioned in the courtyard and Peter denies him. And it says that he was warming himself at a charcoal fire at an anthrakia. I find it significant that it's the same word, the same charcoal fire of denial and failure as it is of fellowship and redemption. Jesus revealed his desire for fellowship with the invite to breakfast around the charcoal fire. Jesus is calling to them that day, come to the charcoal fire and fellowship with me. And I believe he's calling the same thing over us today with an invitation. Sometimes it's a place of restoration as well as a place of fellowship. Sometimes we might need to allow the Lord to take us to the very point of where it all went wrong. In a charcoal fire moment, you see, I think there's deep purpose to this. Jesus turned the point of failure into the point of forgiveness. The joy of forgiveness surely overwhelms the grief of failure. I think if you mentioned a charcoal fire to Peter after this, his first thought would be forgiveness and not failure. Peter may have thought in his heart that he was disqualified, that he was beyond fellowship. Jesus said, come, let's eat together, Peter. Fellowship and forgiveness is what they all needed that day. Jesus was seeking fellowship with Peter and went on to confirm and reassure his calling. Jesus is calling us into the same fellowship, the same closeness of fellowship today. I'm believing that for many during this current circumstance that we find ourselves in, I'm believing that Jesus is calling us to a charcoal fire time of fellowship and reassurance.